In the summer of 2024, Vladimir Putin believed something priceless was finally secure: a naval fleet beyond Ukraine's reach. Billions in military hardware, anchored in the Black Sea, protected by layers of air defense at Sevastopol, their most fortified port. Then a single person, with a drone the size of a briefcase, worth $20,000, destroyed it all. Not gradually, not in theory, but systematically, relentlessly, in real time. Putin's military watched it happen, helpless. This is how asymmetric warfare just redefined modern naval combat, and how a technology Putin thought he had already defeated became his greatest nightmare. Sevastopol was never just a harbor. For generations, Moscow treated this Crimean port as an untouchable sanctuary, a crown jewel of imperial power, fortified to withstand a world war. In the summer of 2024, Russian commanders operated under a singular, unshakable assumption: the Black Sea Fleet was safe. They concentrated billions of dollars in advanced naval assets along the berths, confident that no adversary could touch them. This was Russia's premier naval stronghold. It was protected by a dense, overlapping network of long-range AIR defense systems, coastal radar networks, and heavy electronic warfare installations. It was a closed loop of military dominance. Commanders stacked ships, submarines, and ammunition depots side by side, treating the harbor as an impenetrable shield. To Moscow, Sevastopol was an absolute belief system. If a weapon could survive, it would survive here. But this fortress was built on legacy doctrine. It was designed to repel traditional battleships, heavy bombers, and high-altitude cruise missiles. It was entirely blind to the new reality of the battlefield. A pilot steering a briefcase-sized FP-5 drone worth $20,000 shattered this illusion of safety. This cheap, human-controlled weapon bypassed radar systems worth hundreds of millions. The sudden, violent arrival of these small platforms ripped through decades of tactical certainty. Moscow had gathered its most valuable hardware in a single static location, confident in its defense architecture. Instead, they had created a high-concentration target zone, completely exposed to the cheapest weapons on the modern battlefield. By the time the FP-5 drone campaign intensified, the Russian Navy had already suffered staggering blows. The flagship cruiser Moskva sank on April 13, 2022. Multiple landing craft, including Cerna-class vessels and the large landing ship Novocherkassk, lay destroyed or severely damaged. These losses should have triggered immediate dispersion. Instead, Russian Naval Command doubled down on Sevastopol. This decision was driven by geographic and industrial necessity. Sevastopol functioned as the absolute operational backbone of the Black Sea Fleet. It housed the theater's only advanced repair yards, heavy dry docks, and centralized Naval Command headquarters. If a frigate needed maintenance, if a submarine needed to reload Caliber cruise missiles, or if air defenses needed regional coordination, it had to happen here. Admirals operated under an outdated naval doctrine that concentrating forces within a heavily fortified zone preserved combat power. They believed that pulling ships away to smaller, less equipped ports like Novorossiysk would strip the fleet of its offensive capabilities and leave logistics lines completely severed. By packing their remaining billion-dollar assets into a single harbor, the Russian command sought to protect them under a dense defensive umbrella. But in doing so, they turned their premier naval stronghold into a self-created single point of failure. A $20,000 FFPV kamikaze drone broke this harbor's defense, bypassing legacy military hardware through sheer economic asymmetry. For the cost of a single traditional interceptor missile, Ukraine could procure dozens of these compact, highly maneuverable platforms. Each carried a high-explosive warhead weighing up to 40 kilograms, packing enough chemical energy to tear through steel hulls, breach watertight bulkheads, and detonate stored ammunition. But the true lethality of this attack model lay in its control architecture. This was not an automated missile flying a rigid, pre-programmed path, easily predicted by radar. This was a human-piloted platform. A single operator, stationed miles away, could manage multiple drones simultaneously through a live, high-bandwidth video feed. The pilot operated as a distributed human decision-maker, not just a launch node. This shifted the tactical equation from machine versus machine to human versus human. When encountering heavy electronic jamming or frantic point defense fire, the pilot did not rely on static algorithms. They adapted in real time. With split-second, terminal run adjustments, operators guided their payloads into the exact physical vulnerabilities of a warship, radars, hangars, and engine compartments. What began as experimental, single-pilot sorties quickly scaled into coordinated waves. The math was brutal. A $20,000 drone could easily cripple a $65 million patrol boat or a $400 million submarine. To survive, Russia had to deploy air defenses that cost far more than the targets they were protecting, locking them in an unsustainable cycle of economic attrition. In the summer of 2024, the first waves of Ukrainian FPV drones swept across the Black Sea towards Sevastopol. Russian air defense crews faced an unforgiving, continuous challenge. These incoming weapons forced a constant shift in attack geometry, specifically designed to exploit a massive engineering gap in Russia's defensive umbrella. Russia's premier defense system, the S-400, was advertised to detect high, fast-moving aircraft up to 400 kilometers away. It was built to counter high-altitude threats, flying thousands of feet in the sky. But these drones flew just 20 to 30 meters above the water. At that extreme low altitude, the S-400's radar horizon collapsed. For targets at low elevation, the detection range shrinks to just 8 to 15 kilometers. The radar waves went clean over the incoming drones, reducing the actual detection window to a small fraction of its advertised range. The minimal radar reflection of the plastic and carbon fiber hulls made them nearly invisible until they reached the outer harbor, compressing the reaction time for point defense systems to under 10 seconds. Russian crews fired expensive interceptor missiles into the sky, but the math was broken. Saturation meant Russia could destroy some drones, but they could never destroy enough of them. Stockpiles of S-300 and S-400 missiles, already limited to roughly 400 units across the region, eroded at an unsustainable rate. Once Ukrainian operators found the threshold that overwhelmed the defense systems, the barrier broke. Some drones always got through, creating a math problem that Moscow could not solve. By autumn 2024, the structural damage was undeniable. Commercial satellites and OSINT grade tracking captured a verified pattern of physical destruction. Ships began burning at their berths. Naval analysts documented a direct hit on the Rapucha-class landing ship Novocherkassk. The logistics support vessel Vsevolod Bobrov was hit and set on fire, limping away from the target area. Multiple Cerna-class landing craft, designed to ferry troops and armor, were repeatedly targeted and sent to the bottom of the harbor. This was a methodical, grinding erosion. Russian air defense crews, trapped in static positions, faced severe mental and physical exhaustion. They were fighting a phantom fleet of low-altitude threats with systems built for a completely different century. With every wave, the economic and tactical math shifted further against Moscow. This was a systemic failure of design. Russia's entire air defense doctrine rested on a single fundamental assumption: the enemy would attack using predictable, machine-driven paths. The S-300 and S-400 systems were engineered to track high-speed cruise missiles, supersonic fighter jets, and large aircraft, objects with massive radar signatures flying along mathematically calculable trajectories. If a missile launched, the defense computer calculated its speed, altitude, and vector, firing an interceptor to meet it at a precise point in space. It was a machine versus machine equation. FPV drones shattered this logic. They did not operate on pre-programmed flight paths or predictable physical constraints. Because each drone was controlled by a human pilot viewing a live feed, the weapon became entirely adaptive. A pilot could change direction in a split second, drop altitude to hug the waves, alter speed, or approach the harbor from an unexpected angle. When Russian electronic warfare units activated heavy jamming, it did not end the threat. Instead of dropping out of the sky, the human pilots simply recognized the interference, adjusted their vectors, and searched for a clean frequency or an unjammed path to the target. If the defenses repositioned to cover one sector, the incoming waves changed their attack angles to exploit the newly exposed blind spots. To counter this, Russia attempted to supplement their long-range batteries with shorter-range point defense systems. But this created a secondary, inescapable vulnerability: finite ammunition. No matter how many rapid-fire cannons or short-range missiles they deployed, the defensive systems could not overcome the basic physics of reload times and magazine capacities. The deeper structural flaw was not the performance of any single weapon. It was a defense architecture built to predict machine paths, trying to calculate the unpredictable decisions of human minds. Putin's admirals turned Sevastopol into an irresistible target by packing billion-dollar assets into a single harbor. Concentrating force is a classic military doctrine, but it only works if the outer perimeter can be defended. Traditionally, launching a port attack required highly visible coordination, massive naval fleets, and long logistical tails. It was an operation that a defender could see coming, track on radar, and prepare to meet with overwhelming force. The FPV campaign shattered this structural logic. Hidden operators stationed miles away in relative safety could launch continuous, low-cost drone waves on their own timeline. The attacker dictated the tempo, choosing the hour, the angle, and the frequency of every strike. The Russian Navy was forced into a purely reactive state, wasting precious interceptors to defend against constant, unpredictable pressure. This created a brutal strategic dilemma for Moscow. To protect the fleet, the admirals could disperse their ships. But moving them out of Sevastopol's defensive umbrella meant sending them into smaller, less equipped harbors, lacking dry docks and advanced maintenance infrastructure. Dispersing the vessels would reduce target density inside the main harbor, but it would leave individual warships isolated. Without the concentrated air defenses of the main base, these scattered vessels were harder to support and easier to hunt down one by one. By choosing to stay, the Russian command preserved their logistical network, but guaranteed that their most valuable assets remained packed together, fully exposed to an endless stream of $20,000 threats. The final breakdown of Russia's naval defense centered on speed. The contest ultimately became a raw battle of decision speed and real-time improvisation. Traditional naval defense systems operate on automated logic, designed to track, calculate, and intercept weapons flying on fixed, mathematically predictable paths. This automation works against machines, but it fails against a human mind actively piloting a payload in the terminal phase. An FPV pilot views a live video feed directly from the drone's nose camera. When a threat appears, whether a rapid-fire point defense gun or a sudden wall of electronic interference, the pilot bypasses pre-programmed algorithms. They react instantly, using immediate visual feedback to make split-second adjustments. Russian electronic warfare was built to neutralize automated navigation systems by jamming GPS signals and programmed coordinates. It was entirely unprepared for an improvising human in the loop. When a Ukrainian operator sees static creeping into their screen, they do not abort. They bank the drone hard, dive low to find a clean signal, and approach the target from an entirely new vector. This extreme decentralization completely broke Russian command coordination. Traditional doctrine requires radar updates to be shared, threats to be verified, and formal authorization to be issued before point defenses can reposition. This rigid sequence creates a fatal latency. A command hierarchy takes minutes to share information, run checks, and authorize action. A drone strike takes seconds. By the time a Russian air defense officer secured permission to adjust their sensors, the incoming drone had already changed its altitude, speed, and angle 3 times. This decentralized agility exploited the inherent delay of Russian communications, transforming the defensive network into a slow-moving target. By operating without a centralized authority, these small distributed teams maintained absolute tactical flexibility. The contest shifted from an automated machine versus machine exchange to a direct clash of human reflexes, where a slow-moving military hierarchy could not compete with the sheer cognitive speed of decentralized pilots adapting in real time. By late 2024, what began as tactical embarrassments had escalated into a systemic strategic collapse. The forced retreat of the Black Sea Fleet from Sevastopol established a global proof of concept. For naval planners, procurement officials, and defense analysts worldwide, the campaign shattered the foundational assumptions of modern maritime power. The warning for global navies is stark. Concentrating billion-dollar assets in predictable, static harbors is a fatal vulnerability. Decades of military planning assumed that dense, layered air defense shields could secure any base. Sevastopol proved that even the most advanced radar-guided systems are ill-suited to counter swarms of cheap, low-altitude, highly maneuverable threats. Point defense systems and rapid-fire cannons cannot overcome the basic physics of reload times and magazine capacities when facing coordinated mass attacks. Even when Russia recognized the danger, frantic efforts to upgrade local defenses and relocate remaining warships to Novorossiysk failed to solve the core crisis. The underlying issue was a brutal, unyielding, economic equation. Repositioning ships did not fix the cost-exchange ratio, as the threat simply followed the assets to their new, less equipped anchorages. The future of naval conflict favors weapons that are the cheapest to deploy, hardest to intercept, and easiest to mass produce. When a $20,000 drone can continuously threaten capital ships and force a superpower fleet into hiding, the traditional model of naval dominance implodes. Navies can no longer build defense strategies around finite, expensive interceptors. The campaign at Sevastopol was the ultimate proof of this shift, a clear warning that the era of uncontested naval sanctuaries is gone forever. Today, the era of unchallenged naval supremacy is dead. The shifting math of warfare now guarantees that cheap, adaptive technology can overwhelm legacy giants. Every global navy is watching, realizing that steel hulls no longer buy security. The age of the Colossus is over. The future belongs to the agile. What does this mean for the future of global fleets? Share your thoughts below.